The moment the protagonist's eyes fluttered open, he knew something wasn't right. The soft hum of machines filled the air, and the light above him was unnaturally bright. It wasn't the harshness of daylight, but a gentle, artificial glow that seemed to wrap itself around him. For a moment, he wondered if he was still dreaming, but the chill in the air, the unfamiliar scent of metal and something sweet, told him otherwise. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, and tried to make sense of his surroundings. The room was sleek and clean, with walls that glowed with soft blue lights. There were no windows, only smooth metallic surfaces that stretched out far beyond his vision. He was in a bed, no doubt about that, but not the kind of bed he was used to. The sheets were made of a material that was far too smooth and soft, almost like silk, but cooler to the touch. It felt as though his body was being hugged by the very fabric itself. The bed was against a wall, or what appeared to be a wall, though it was unlike any wall he had ever seen. It was almost as if the room was designed for something, or someone, entirely different from him. His heart raced, and a chill ran down his spine as he slowly stood up. His legs felt a bit wobbly, but he steadied himself against a nearby table. The room was dimly lit, but the soft blue hue illuminated his surroundings in a strange, surreal way. He wasn't sure if this was a dream or reality, but there was one thing he was sure of. He had no idea where he was or how he got here. As his eyes scanned the room, they stopped on something, or rather someone. Two women. They were seated across from him, both calm and composed, their expressions unreadable. The first woman had long, flowing hair, dark and shiny like the midnight sky, cascading over her shoulders in a perfect waterfall. Her skin was smooth, with an almost ethereal glow, and her eyes, deep, dark, and captivating, were fixed on him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. The second woman sat slightly to the side, more casual but equally striking. Her features were soft but sharp in all the right ways, with light golden brown hair framing her face. For a moment, the protagonist froze, his thoughts scattered. Who are they? Where am I? His heart hammered in his chest, but his body refused to move. He could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken questions hanging heavy in the room. The first woman spoke, her voice smooth and melodic. "You're awake," she said, her eyes never leaving his. "Good. It's time to begin." Her voice sent a shiver through him, and he opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His throat felt dry, and his mind was a blur. All he could do was stare at her, trying to make sense of the situation. His confusion must have shown, because the second woman chuckled softly, the sound light and playful, yet with a touch of something deeper, more complex. "Don't worry," she said, standing up and walking toward him. "You're safe. At least for now." He felt a wave of unease wash over him. Safe? How could he feel safe when he had no idea where he was or why he was there? What did they mean, for now? The first woman smiled faintly, as if reading his thoughts. "This is an experiment," she explained. "A co-living experiment between humans and aliens. You're part of it. Don't worry, there's nothing to fear." He stared at her, trying to process what she had just said. Aliens? Co-living experiment. His mind spun. He felt like he was in a science fiction movie, but none of this felt scripted. It was too real. "But why me?" he finally managed to croak. His voice sounded foreign to his own ears, as though it had been years since he last spoke. "What do you want from me?" The woman's eyes softened, but there was still something unreadable in them. "Nothing from you. Not yet," she said, her voice tinged with something that almost sounded like pity. "But everything you do from now on will shape the outcome of this experiment. You're here to help us learn how to coexist with your species." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Coexist. This was a test. He wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that he was being used as part of an experiment, or the terrifying possibility that these two beautiful, yet strange, alien women were not what they seemed. I know this is a lot to take in, the second woman added, stepping closer to him. She studied him carefully, as if assessing his reaction. But we're here to help you. You'll need to trust us. Trust. That was the last thing he felt. Trust had no place in this strange, alien world where nothing made sense. And yet, the way the two women spoke, the way they looked at him, it was as if they expected him to accept all of this without question. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but he held himself back. His mind raced, and a part of him, despite the fear and confusion, couldn't help but wonder, was this truly the beginning of something bigger than himself? He glanced back at the two women, both now standing and watching him, waiting for his response. The tension was palpable, and it felt as though the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. And then, just as he opened his mouth to speak, the door to the room slid open with a soft, metallic hiss, and another figure entered, an alien with a commanding presence. The newcomer didn't look at him, only at the two women, and in that brief moment, the protagonist's heart skipped a beat. Who was this new person? And what role did they play in this strange experiment? The door closed silently behind the new figure, and the women turned their attention back to him. He was left standing in the middle of the room, more confused than ever, with one question gnawing at his mind. What happens now? The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next chapter of this bizarre experiment to unfold. The strange, metallic door hissed shut behind the newcomer. The protagonist stood frozen in place, his mind racing, trying to process everything he had just heard. A co-living experiment. The idea was too bizarre to grasp fully, yet the calm, assured expressions of the two alien women before him made it clear that this was no dream. They were serious. The newcomer, a tall alien who exuded an aura of power, stepped forward as the two women exchanged a brief glance. There was a sense of familiarity in the way they looked at one another, as though they were all involved in something much larger than him. The alien woman who had first spoken turned to him, her dark eyes gleaming with an unspoken knowledge. She gestured toward a chair near the table, urging him to sit. "Please, take a seat," she said, her voice soft but commanding. He didn't argue. His legs felt weak beneath him as he sank into the chair, still processing the situation. The room was quiet now, except for the faint hum of the technology around them. The walls, still glowing softly with that eerie blue light, seemed to pulse, as though alive, listening to the conversation that was about to unfold. The second woman, the one with the playful attitude, stood by the window now, looking out at the vast, endless stars beyond. "It's not every day that a human is chosen for an experiment like this," she remarked, almost to herself. "You must have a lot of questions." The protagonist opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. His mind was a whirlwind of confusion, anger, and disbelief. "Why me?" was all he could manage, his voice low and filled with both curiosity and frustration. The first woman, who seemed to be the one in charge, smiled gently. "You're here because we chose you. The purpose of this experiment is simple. We, my people and yours, are learning to coexist. For centuries, humans and aliens have lived separate lives, never understanding each other. We believe that by coexisting in the same living space, both species can learn from one another, grow together, and ultimately work toward peace. You are the bridge between our two worlds." Her words echoed in the protagonist's mind, but they made little sense. A bridge between worlds. He looked at the two women, then back at the newcomer, who still hadn't said a word. There was something unsettling about his presence, something far more intimidating than the women's calm demeanor. The first woman continued, sensing his unease. "We, the alien species known as the Thalnari, have been observing your planet for a long time. We've seen the potential for cooperation, but there's also great danger if we do not learn to live together. Your planet is on the brink of war, and without understanding, you might destroy yourselves." She paused, her eyes never leaving his. "This experiment is a test not just for you, but for both of us. It's a trial of your species' ability to evolve and adapt. You must share this space with us, learn from us, and ultimately decide if humanity is ready for a peaceful future with other species." The protagonist struggled to absorb the weight of her words. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. Peaceful future. He had barely come to terms with the fact that he was in an alien place, let alone the idea that his participation in this bizarre experiment could change the future of his entire species. "I don't understand," he finally said, his voice shaking. "Why me? Why did you pick me?" The woman's gaze softened. "You were chosen because of your resilience, your adaptability. We observe your actions, your potential. You have qualities that make you ideal for this experiment. We need someone who can understand both worlds, yours and ours. We believe you will learn, and ultimately help others learn, what it means to truly live together. But it won't be easy." The words hung in the air, and the protagonist felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. It won't be easy. The thought echoed in his mind, but he had no choice. He couldn't leave. He didn't even know how he'd gotten here in the first place. The second woman, who had been silent for a while, turned around and approached him, her expression serious for the first time. "You will live here with us, as equals. You will share meals with us, converse with us, and be involved in our daily routines. We have rules, just as you do. No physical harm, no dishonesty, and no avoidance of responsibility. You must be present, both in mind and spirit, to make this experiment work." She smiled again, but it was a small, almost sad smile. "We can be friends, or we can be strangers, but how we interact will affect the outcome. And just so you know, we'll be watching every move you make." The protagonist felt a chill run down his spine. Watching every move he makes. He was being observed, scrutinized. It felt like being a lab rat, a subject in a study that he had no control over. But as much as he wanted to argue, he knew that fighting would do him no good. The first woman stood and walked toward him, her steps deliberate. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a softer tone. "You have the opportunity to change the future, not just for your people, but for mine as well. But remember, you are not alone in this. You will have us to guide you, to help you. You will live with us, learn from us, and hopefully, grow alongside us." Her eyes were intense, but there was something comforting in them now, something that made him feel like this wasn't just an experiment. This was a partnership, a chance to shape the future of both species. But as the first woman's words sank in, the protagonist still couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Why this experiment? Why now? There was something more to this than they were telling him, something he wasn't yet ready to understand. The second woman placed a hand on his shoulder, as though trying to reassure him, but her touch only added to the unease he felt. "You're part of something big now," she said, her voice quiet. "You can help us find a way to make it work, or you can fail. The choice is yours." He nodded slowly, though his mind was still reeling. "The choice is yours." Those words lingered in the air like a heavy cloud, a promise and a threat all at once. As he sat there, the reality of his situation began to settle in. He wasn't just a participant in an experiment. He was a key figure in something that could change the course of history. And for better or worse, there was no going back. The days in the alien world began to blend together in a surreal haze. At first, the protagonist couldn't quite grasp the routine, the unfamiliar surroundings, or even the rules of the co-living experiment. Everything felt alien, yet, oddly enough, he was beginning to feel somewhat at ease in the company of the two women. The first few days had been a whirlwind. Every time he tried to ask questions, they simply redirected him, urging him to embrace the experience, to learn through living with them. "You have to live it to understand it," the first woman would say, her calm, measured tone never faltering. The second woman, on the other hand, seemed more eager to share her knowledge and often spent hours explaining how her species had advanced technologically, socially, and emotionally. One of the first things the protagonist noticed was how the alien world functioned. Nothing like Earth. The technology that powered the entire station was beyond anything humans could even dream of. Everything was automated, from the meal dispensers to the way doors opened and closed. The walls themselves seemed to hum with an energy, like they were alive, pulsing with light and rhythm with their thoughts. It was as though the very air itself was infused with advanced technology. He was introduced to an alien meal system. At first, he felt uneasy as the food was not served in traditional ways, but came in small glowing pods that resembled little orbs. He was told that the pods contained everything they needed: nutrients, hydration, and energy, all compressed into one small, efficient serving. At first, it seemed bizarre, but after a few days, he found that the meals were remarkably filling and satisfying. The sensation of hunger vanished within moments of consuming the pods, leaving him with a sense of contentment that he could never quite explain. The taste was unlike anything from Earth, an amalgamation of flavors he couldn't put into words. It was a strange but comforting experience. During the day, his activities were simple. He would spend time with the two alien women, learning from them. The first woman, who had a calm and mysterious air about her, taught him about their culture. She explained how the Thalneri, her species, valued peace and understanding above all else. They had evolved for centuries to control their emotions and communicate on a deeper, more connected level. Their society was built on cooperation, and their technology was driven by the need to preserve life rather than destroy it. As much as the protagonist tried to absorb everything she was saying, there was always a part of him that couldn't shake off the feeling that there was more to their peaceful society than they were letting on. The second woman, on the other hand, seemed to take a more hands-on approach. She was the one who showed him how to use some of the advanced technology, which, despite being incredibly efficient, was also incredibly strange to him. One of the things that fascinated him the most was the way they communicated with the station's systems. The Thalneri didn't need buttons or screens. They used a system that was completely mental, where thoughts could be projected and received through specialized neural interfaces. She showed him how to tap into it, and though he couldn't fully understand it at first, the process intrigued him. It felt like an unspoken language, a way of connecting to everything around them. Yet, even as he learned, something about the experience still unsettled him. He couldn't deny that he was beginning to grow fond of his two alien roommates, but there was an underlying tension that always seemed to linger in the air. He noticed it during their shared meals, where there was always a slight pause before they spoke, as if they were waiting for him to ask the right questions or say something profound. But he didn't know what to ask. The weight of the entire experiment, of his role in it, loomed over him. One evening, after a particularly long day of learning, the protagonist decided to take a walk around the station. He needed to clear his mind. The halls were quiet, and as he wandered deeper into the labyrinth of corridors, he couldn't help but feel a sense of isolation. The entire place felt empty, even though he was surrounded by advanced technology and alien life forms. The walls seemed to close in on him as he walked. It was a strange sensation, as if he were in a dream, but couldn't wake up. He finally found himself in a small, tranquil room filled with plants, strange, glowing plants that seemed to hum with a faint energy. He hadn't noticed it before, but the moment he stepped inside, he felt a calmness wash over him. The air was thick with the scent of the plants, and for the first time since he had arrived, he felt at peace. It was as if the room itself had a calming effect, drawing out the tension that had built up in his chest since the moment he arrived. He spent hours there, lost in thought. It was during this time that he realized something. He wasn't just living in an alien world. He was beginning to become part of it. The Thalneri were not just teaching him about their ways. They were making him question everything he knew about his own world. He had always been told that humanity was capable of great things, but the more he learned from the aliens, the more he wondered if humans were truly ready for the kind of peace they were offering. The next day, as he sat with the two women, his mind was racing with thoughts of the future. "I've been thinking," He began hesitantly. About what you said. About humanity and peace. Is it really possible? The first woman's gaze softened, and she nodded. It is possible, but only if humanity can learn to change. You see, peace isn't just about the absence of conflict. It's about understanding, cooperation, and connection. You must first learn to understand yourselves before you can understand others. The words hung in the air, and the protagonist felt a wave of realization wash over him. The Thalneri were offering something far more profound than just co-living. They were offering a chance to evolve, to understand the world in a way humanity had never considered. But as much as he was beginning to understand, a part of him still felt like an outsider. The Thalneri had known each other for centuries, and their culture was built on unity. He was just a human, someone who had been thrust into their world without any warning, without any preparation. How could he ever truly belong here? Could humanity, as a whole, ever adapt to this level of understanding and peace? As the days went on, the protagonist began to realize that this experiment wasn't just about his personal growth, it was about humanity's future. And that future, he now understood, was inextricably linked to the delicate balance between humans and aliens. The question, though, remained. Could humanity rise to the challenge, or would it all fall apart? For the first time since arriving in the alien world, the protagonist wasn't sure what the answer was. But one thing was certain, his life would never be the same again. As the days stretched into weeks, the protagonist settled into a new rhythm in the alien world. He had adapted to the strange, quiet routine of life with the Thalneri. He learned their language, their customs, and even began to feel more at home in the advanced, otherworldly environment. Yet, despite the comfort he had started to find in the alien station, there was always a lingering sense of something unknown, something hidden just beneath the surface of his daily life. The two women who had become his companions in this alien world were more than just guides. Over time, he had come to respect and even care for them. The first woman, with her calm, collected demeanor, seemed to embody everything the Thalneri stood for: peace, balance, and emotional control. The second woman, more lively and open, had a way of making even the most challenging lessons feel light-hearted and achievable. But as close as they had become, the protagonist knew there were things they weren't telling him. Questions remained unanswered. Answers that he couldn't quite find, no matter how hard he tried to dig deeper. One evening, as he sat in the tranquil garden where he often retreated to think, he noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. The soft hum of the station's energy systems seemed to fluctuate slightly, and the air felt heavier than usual. He stood up, sensing that something was amiss. It wasn't a sense of danger, but rather a deep, uneasy feeling that something was about to happen. He couldn't explain it, but he had learned to trust his instincts in this alien world. As he made his way back to the main chamber, he saw the two women waiting for him. They were standing side by side, their expressions unreadable. The first woman looked at him, her eyes deep and knowing, as though she had been expecting him. The second woman, usually so lively, seemed tense, her eyes darting between him and the other woman. There was an undeniable shift in their energy, a quiet tension that crackled in the air. "You've been learning well," the first woman said, her voice steady but filled with an unspoken weight. "You've absorbed our teachings, and you've become part of our world. But now it's time for you to understand the true purpose of this experiment." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. True purpose. He had always known there was something more, something deeper, but hearing it spoken aloud brought a chill over him. His heart began to race as he looked from one woman to the other. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The second woman stepped forward, her face serious for the first time. "You were never just a participant in this experiment," she said, her voice tinged with a mixture of regret and inevitability. "You were chosen for a reason, because you have a unique connection to the outcome of this mission. But there's more. The truth is, this co-living experiment was never about humanity and the Thalneri coexisting peacefully." She paused, as though struggling to find the right words. It was about testing whether humanity could overcome its most destructive nature, its instinct for war, for violence. And you were the catalyst. You were the key. The protagonist stared at her, his mind reeling. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "I've been learning. I've been trying to understand. How could I be the key?" The first woman stepped forward, her expression calm but firm. The experiment wasn't just about living together. It was about a much deeper test. We needed to see if a human could overcome the primal instincts that drive conflict, that drive war. Your kind has a deep hidden potential for both destruction and growth. The question was never whether you could live with us. It was whether you could rise above the nature of your own species. The weight of her words slammed into him, and for a moment, he couldn't breathe. Everything he had learned, everything he thought he understood, now seemed like a lie. He was the test. The thought repeated in his mind like an echo. He wasn't just a participant. He was a subject, chosen for his ability to bridge a gap between two worlds, to determine if humanity could ever evolve beyond its destructive tendencies. The second woman's face softened. "We've seen that you've learned well. You've changed. You've grown in ways we didn't expect. But the truth is, you were always meant to make a choice that would affect not just your future, but the future of humanity." The protagonist felt his knees go weak. He wanted to scream, to run, to escape from this nightmare of truths and revelations. But there was no escape. The truth was staring him in the face, and he had no choice but to confront it. "But why me?" he whispered, his voice shaking. "Why did you choose me? What makes me so special?" The first woman's eyes softened, and she finally spoke in a gentler tone. "Because, despite the violence and destruction that runs through your species, you possess something extraordinary. You have the ability to see beyond your own instincts, to connect with others, and to find peace where none seems possible. You are the one who could show us whether humanity could rise above its own nature." The protagonist stood there, overwhelmed. His mind was a blur, trying to make sense of the revelation. He had been chosen as a test. His every action, every decision, had been part of a grand experiment. But now that he understood the truth, there was still a part of him that resisted. Could humanity really change? Could he help make it happen? The first woman stepped forward, her voice low but filled with purpose. "Now, the time has come for you to make the final choice. You must decide if humanity is truly ready to change, to evolve. If you choose to embrace what you've learned here, if you choose to rise above the nature of your species, then there is hope. If not, then the future is uncertain." For a moment, silence hung in the air. The protagonist's mind raced, but his heart knew the answer. He had been given a gift, an opportunity to show humanity a different way, to break the cycle of violence and destruction. It wasn't going to be easy, but he knew what he had to do. With a deep breath, he looked at both women, and with newfound strength, he spoke. "I choose to rise. I choose peace. I choose change." A smile flickered on the first woman's face, and the second woman nodded, her eyes filled with pride. They had been waiting for this moment, waiting for him to make the choice. As the words left his mouth, the station seemed to pulse with energy, as if the very walls were acknowledging his decision. The Thalnari had tested him, and in the end, he had passed. The experiment was over, but this was only the beginning. The protagonist stood tall, a sense of calm washing over him. For the first time since arriving in the alien world, he felt truly at peace, and as he looked toward the future, he knew that this was just the first step toward a brighter tomorrow, for both humanity and the Thalnari. And as the two women stood beside him, he realized that this was no longer just an experiment. This was a new beginning, a new hope, for them all.